Because how are you going to tell someone, hey, don't lose weight for your health, even though you're about to get type 2 diabetes and possibly have your foot cut off? Like, how is that positive? And yeah, it was really hurtful to me that these people didn't see me as a actual person.
Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today we are going to be talking to Shannon, who was previously very big into the body positivity, fat liberation space on TikTok, Instagram, social media, and recently has been getting out of that and has been dealing with some backlash that she has experienced. And so she actually messaged me on Instagram, and she had tagged me in a story because she feels that one of the last videos that I did where someone in the fat acceptance space kind of called out different creators for wanting to lose weight.
So we have, of course, seen a large uptick, pun intended, of fat creators now posting about their intentional weight loss. The problem is when you are on an intentional weight loss journey and then you also intentionally on the fat community at the same time. If you do happen to gain weight, or if you do happen to have this moment where your pendulum comes back to a more steady middle ground, the fat community will remember. We will. And most likely, statistically, it will happen that you will gain weight back.
She felt that that original video that creator made was about her. And so she felt like, you know, this is about me. I would love to share my story. And so we kind of talked a little bit before this, and I was like, all right, cool. Like, you know, I'd love to let you share your story on the channel. And so basically this is just me allowing her to share her side of the story and share, you know, her experience as being someone that was pretty big in the body positivity, fat liberation space and is now coming out of it, and how that has been for her. And so without further ado, I'll just let her tell her story. Again, Shannon, thank you so much for joining us, and let's just get into it. Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I'm excited, and I appreciate you messaging me and wanting to share your story. So I guess without further ado, I guess kind of like, you know, who are you and why were you interested in sharing your story on the channel?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Shannon. I go by Shannon Davey online, and I am a content creator and an actress. I grew up doing theater and performing since I was 5, and that's how I kind of got into social media in general. I was using it to promote the improv and comedy shows that I was doing in college, and I've always just kind of had a love for creating content online. I would vlog in high school, my friends and I, on my Facebook back then. And yeah, it kind of grew into something else during the pandemic. And during the pandemic is when I got more involved in, I guess, what you would consider body positivity, fat acceptance, fat positivity, liberation type content. And I grew my page from my Instagram page from about 8,000 followers. It jumped to 12,000 pretty much overnight during the pandemic, I think, because no one was really doing anything besides being on their phones and laptops. So, yeah.
So what do you feel about like the fat acceptance, fat liberation movement? Like what do you feel like drew you into that, and like what made you want to be part of it, I guess?
So I've always been plus size. I've been plus size since middle school. I was a size 14 in like 7th grade. And I always felt like an outcast a bit because of it. I grew up in Southern California in the early 2000s. So being fat was like the worst thing you could be back then. And I discovered my summer between freshman and sophomore year of college around 2015. I discovered Tess Holiday. And she, I think, was like the kind of head lead of body positivity going into the fat liberation community. And for myself, I would consider body positivity kind of an umbrella term. And then fat acceptance is kind of a subculture of body positivity. So I kind of got introduced to body positivity through her and her content of the, you know, hashtag F your beauty standards and all of that. And to me, it started as a really good thing. I was shocked to see that there was pretty much an internationally known model that was close to my size, and we kind of look alike. I've actually met her in person. I met her at Eloquii, which is a plus size brand in Chicago, their physical store, back in I think 2016. We have a picture together and we're standing next to each other. And I remember my caption when I posted it being like, we look like cousins. Like, and the employees in the store were mentioning how they agree we look like we're related in some way. And I was really inspired by the fact that she didn't let her, sorry, my dog is barking in the background. I was inspired by the fact that she didn't let her weight prevent her from trying to have a successful career in modeling. And I'd been acting since I was 5 years old, and I'd never thought about being a plus size model because I knew that plus size models existed, but usually they were like a size 12. And like I mentioned, I was a size 14 since middle school. So I never thought that modeling was something that I would ever get involved with. And then I ended up having a somewhat successful modeling career.
And so you, I know that you were kind of in the plus size kind of like content creation thing for a little bit. And then you said that you ended up starting your own kind of business in that sector, right? So how did that kind of happen for you?
So yeah, I've been creating content. I'm a lifestyle content creator. I just happen to be plus size. And so I've been creating content for the past 4 years professionally on Instagram. And the last 3 years, I'd worked with tons and tons of brands. I got mainly into it after 2020 with COVID. And I actually had a brand who stole one of my photos from my Instagram, put it on their website. And I had mutual friends reach out asking me about, how that happened. And I didn't even know that they had stolen the photo. So then I requested that they pay me, and it was a whole thing. And basically I decided that there's a lot of creators who are new and naive, and they don't understand how this industry works in regards to content creation and getting paid for their worth. And a lot of brands know that, and they take advantage of creators. So I wanted to be someone who I've always been into acting. So I knew about acting agencies, and I was represented by an acting agency for 2 years, but I'd never really seen an agency for creators the way that I've kind of set up my agency. So we're about 2 years old now. I started the agency around this time last year, and it's really grown. And I had a lot of fat acceptance, fat activists, if you will, in my agency as clients. And it's been a whole thing basically with, I consider fat acceptance to have been a good thing for a while, like body positivity, fat acceptance. But then when I got deeper into it, I started to question things and doing my own deprogramming, if you will, because I would consider it a cult.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that because we had a conversation before this, and you mentioned that, and so I think that's important to kind of bring up. So, we've talked about how you got into it and like the positives, because I've always said I think there are a lot of positives, especially when it comes to body positivity. It's in the freaking title, right? But there's like a lot of reasons why people will get into it. So what was it like for you when you did maybe start to maybe feel yourself, hey, maybe I want to lose weight, or maybe I'm not super happy with the size that I am, or I'm noticing that I'm having some health issues, whatever, right? Like whatever was going on in your life that made you want to lose weight or even consider it. Like what was going on then, and then what were the steps that you took there? And I know that leads into a story and a conversation about basically how we got connected. So if you want to tell that story, feel free.
Yeah, so since I've always been plus size, I felt like this was a group that was important for me to be a part of, for a community of people, especially with COVID, everything was online. So it felt like I was able to have these friends and people who understood me and cared. And then when it got negative for me was when I started to think about losing weight probably in 2022 because I was having health issues and I was scared to admit that I wanted to lose weight. It took me a year of deprogramming basically from the rhetoric that they were spreading online to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't losing weight because I hate myself, like I feel like so many plus size people felt back in the early 2000s with crash and fad diets being the big thing. I thought about, no, I love myself and I have so many friends and people who I want to go do things with, and I can't fit into a freaking booth. You know, like I can't fit on a roller coaster. How is this positive? I feel like I'm not embarrassed about my weight, but I feel embarrassed about the limitations that my choices have caused me to where I can't do just basic things like Rosie B, this other creator. There was a whole Bootygate debacle with Fat Girl Flow. And I remember having moments where I could not wipe myself properly as well and having to use a bidet, which there's nothing wrong with using a bidet. I think it's sanitary, but it's the fact that how is that positive that I'm losing my basic abilities? Like,
yeah, like you're almost losing like autonomy for yourself. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
And so I decided that for myself, it was an act of self-love and appreciation for who I am to start losing the weight and getting healthier for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's something I've said in videos before is like I didn't hate myself when I was fat, but I hated what the fat had done to me and what it limited me in. And so it's not like I hated myself so I lost weight. It was like I hated what the fat was doing to myself because I loved myself enough to want to change and want to live the life that I felt I deserved. And I think a lot of times people, when they hear that, they're like, well, if there wasn't this stigma against being bigger, then this wouldn't be an issue. And I'm just like, I understand where you're coming from, but there are certain things that it's not a stigma, right? Like you talked about wiping your own butt. Like that has nothing to do with anyone else. That's a you thing, right? Or like me not being able to bend my own, bend down and tie my own shoes. Like there was plenty of things that have nothing to do with anyone else and anyone else's perception of me that were limited because of my size that I wanted to change, right? Like being able to move and just move in a way that I don't feel like I can't walk half a mile without being like, that's hard, right? There were just so many things that I wanted to do for myself because I love myself, but I won't go on that diatribe. I've done that enough. But so,
yeah.
So you had this moment, right? And I'm sure it was a lot of moments where you're like, I want to start losing weight. And so what happened when you decided to do that, and what was the response for you?
Yeah, so I've been actively, intentionally losing weight for the past year. I've lost about 80 pounds, and it's all been naturally through changing my lifestyle. I go on long walks, I go to the gym, and I eat things that for my body specifically are better for me than I was before. I was kind of, going back to what you were saying, it's an act of self-love to start this health journey essentially. And for myself, I am recovering from food addiction and what I would consider a binge eating disorder. And so before, it felt like because I was depressed or I didn't like myself, that's how I ended up gaining so much weight, because I was using the food as a coping mechanism to deal with those things. Whereas now I've brought in healthier habits, like going on a walk instead of sitting on the couch and, eating as much as possible. And so I think that's where the narrative needs to change. It's not an act of self-love to be binging yourself into disability, essentially.
Yeah. And so what was, I just imagine that you are in charge of a lot of these people that are content creators in this body positivity space, but you're having these thoughts of like, hey, I'm not really happy where I'm at. What was that like for you? Like, how did that how did that go?
So it was hard to continue to keep up and watch their content for me, because in my opinion, it was enabling a binge addiction. And yeah, essentially I was in charge of about not in charge of, but I was helping with securing brand deals for about 10 different creators. I wouldn't consider all of them fat activists, but everyone was plus size for the most part in that group. I have 20 clients though. So half of them stayed and then half of them left because they didn't like that I was basically coming out on my Instagram stories saying that I'd noticed very cult-like behavior in this fat acceptance movement. And what I noticed were a lot of things that were cult. How it became cult-like for me was, well, I've always been really into watching documentaries about cults. So I can see the signs pretty well. And once I started deprogramming out of fat acceptance, fat liberation, whatever you want to call this thing, that's when I noticed how truly cult-like it was. So a lot of these creators are hosting either virtual or in-person events to get people involved, which is basically, you're trying to get more and more people involved who, like I mentioned before, I've always been plus size, and back in the early 2000s, being plus size was seen as something so terrible and horrible that your self-esteem is really lowered, and so you're very vulnerable, and that makes you very susceptible to a cult. And I'd already been in like a comedy cult, if you will, because I was taking classes at the Second City. So I've always been a comedy gal myself. And everyone who's been in some sort of improv classes in the Chicago comedy scene would probably agree with me that there's cult-like behavior in that. So right before COVID happened, I was fired from my job at Second City, and I was devastated. I thought that my dreams of being on the Second City main stage and meeting Lorne Michaels and being on SNL and being the next Aidy Bryant, that was the journey I was hoping to be on, right? And that was crushed because of what I internalized as fat phobia from the head chef who'd worked there, because I worked in the bar restaurant serving food and drinks. So I was fired and I turned to a really, really dark place. I got involved in, addiction. And I turned to this body positive, now turned fat acceptance, fat liberation cult because I was kicked out of the other one. And I was susceptible. That's what happens when you're in one cult. You kind of go into another one because you're very vulnerable. So during COVID, I couldn't talk to a lot of people in the outside world. I lived by myself in a studio apartment that I was paying for on my own. And that's how I feel like I got really involved with the wrong crowd, essentially. And it's funny because they say that about, drug addiction as well. But I feel like food addiction and drug addiction, they kind of go hand in hand with my own situation. And yeah, I was just very vulnerable and needed a community of people, and they were there for me online. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this online community has saved me. And for a time, it felt like they had, and then I felt like they'd ruined me.
So why do you feel that they like? How do you go from feeling like you were saved to then feeling like you were ruined? Like, what was that like?
I think that there was saving in the fact that I didn't have to just completely hate myself for being plus size, and I didn't have to, feel like I wasn't deserving of having friends and living essentially just because I had extra fat on myself. And also I wanted to put it out there for everyone who's watching. I would really like people to start thinking, instead of using the terms fat person, to start thinking about a person who has fat on them instead of making your fatness into your entire identity, because I did that for a long time and it's not a good way to think about things. I really think, I posted online talking about how I wanted to help people now lose weight. And someone said, "You're trying to eradicate fat people." And I said, quite the opposite. I'm trying to eradicate the fat on people so that they can live.
Yeah.
Like, how are you not understanding that concept?
Well,
I don't hate people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to help.
It's just I've had that thing as well, and I'm like, you know, with my content and the stuff that I make, like, I am not saying that every fat person has to watch it and they all have to lose weight. My content is for the person that wants to lose weight. So if you don't want to lose weight, just don't watch it and you'll be good. Like, I promise, you know. I don't know. That is interesting, and I do like that kind of that idea, right? Like, someone's not a fat person. There's a lot more to them. They just happen to have extra fat on them, right? And so when you started to come out as, like, you know, feeling like, hey, I'm not super happy with, you know, the fat acceptance, or I feel like it's been damaging to me to a certain extent. How was that like for those, you know, you said you had 10 people that left. How did that happen? Like, I'm sure that didn't go over super smoothly.
It did not. So through the last year of deprogramming, little background story, I was dating someone who used to be 620 pounds. Mm-hmm. And when I met him, he was down to about 350. And we were both around 350 at that time. And he'd mentioned wanting to have me lose weight. And I, like the fat acceptance creators who I'd been following and having these relationships with, my immediate reaction was negative. I just didn't like that I was saying that's fat phobic. I don't like that you're saying that. But then slowly, of us still continuing to date and understanding the health benefits. I mean, when you're 620 pounds, it's really hard in our society, and it's really hard on us physically. And yeah, my highest weight was 350 pounds. So over the last year, I started, you know, actively losing weight and looking for content to help me with doing that. But I didn't really want to follow content from people who have always been thin, because I figure they don't know my struggles. They don't know what I've been through. But someone who used to be 350 pounds, or, like, you know, in your case, John, over 400 pounds, they understand where I'm coming from. They understand the struggle of trying to lose weight over and over again, but then somehow they've overcome and they've been able to keep the weight off. I think I'd seen a video that you kept your weight off for like over 10 years, you know? So it's like watching the content of someone who's actually done the thing that I want to do inspires me. So I started watching tons of TikTok creators and a bunch of YouTube creators who share a similar story. And it really helped me to recognize how problematic the whole fat acceptance movement really had been. But again, like I said, it started as something really good and made me feel like I had a community of people. But I think there needs to be some sort of line where, okay, I've accepted myself. Now I need to have some hope and faith that I can make positive changes. Yeah, because that's part of recovery, regardless of, you know, whatever you're recovering from. You need to accept the fact that you have a problem, and then you have to have the faith in yourself that you're able to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's super important, and it's something that I harp on, because, like, I hear of that, you know, that statistic is thrown around all the time. I talked about it recently in a video, actually, like, you know, 95% of people can't lose the weight, and they all gain it back, and it's almost like it's become the standard. Like, everyone says that, so it almost feels like, for me, as someone that has kept it off, it's like, well, okay, do I not exist? Like, what about all the friends I have that have been able to keep it off? It's frustrating, right? Because I share this information not because, again, I'm trying to shame anyone, but I want people to understand it is possible. And, like, if it is something that you want, which I know there are plenty of people that do want that, they should be able to find content that shows them how to do it, or at least encourages them that they can do it, right? Instead of all the content being, it's impossible, don't even try. Like, who is that going to help? Yeah. Like, you know, so I understand.
Basically I've gotten a lot of hate from the fat acceptance community, and a lot of people want to throw that statistic around. And my thing is, okay, well, if only 5% of people do it, let me be part of the 5%. Mm-hmm. Like, if that's the case. But also, I think that that's a really outdated theory, because of modern technology. This isn't the early 2000s anymore, people. We have modern technology, and a lot of creators, especially on TikTok, are making nutrition and exercise content that is super helpful and is free. So we've never in history had this much free education available for us to learn how to do things in a healthy and sustainable way. And that's why I think that, there's this whole resurgence of weight loss creators and content because of the whole Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy type stuff. And for myself personally, I wouldn't take any sort of weight loss drug because my mother, she had type 2 diabetes since she was 18, and it runs on my mom's side of the family. My grandma, my aunt, my mom, they've all had type 2 diabetes. I don't, thankfully. I'm afraid, honestly, that if I hadn't started this health journey last year, I would have gotten it because I was recently in the hospital and they took my blood work. I'm 0.1% away from having type 2 diabetes. I'm pre-diabetic right now. So I've been on this health journey for the past year. Again, if I didn't lose this weight, I would have developed type 2 diabetes for sure. So that's where I think a lot of the content creators recognize that is a need that a lot of people have. They want to lose weight, but so many people have tried and failed so many times that now they're turning to weight loss medication. And some people don't even need to be taking it. So they're taking it away from type 2 diabetics that genuinely need it. And that's where it makes me feel uncomfortable because of my own family and situation. And my mom, she actually has been in and out of the hospital for the past year due to complications with taking a bunch of type 2 diabetes medication. So that's something to think about too for people who want to turn to the weight loss medication. We don't know the full extent of, I guess, what can happen to you if you take it for a long time. And majority of people are supposed to be on it for the rest of their life, but there's serious health complications that come with that. So for me, I decided I wanted to do it naturally. And so that's why I'm trying to share my story of how I've done it, because so far I've lost 80 pounds naturally, which a lot of people, to even do that, have gone under a knife to have surgery or to buy expensive medication that they might not even genuinely need. So I'm trying to share my story. But yeah, they keep saying the 5% statistic. And all right, if genuinely it is 5%, then some people are going to be in that and they might as well share their story.
Yeah. I agree with the 5% statistic. I think that it is definitely thrown around too much, and it's just, I think it's a way to silence people from like really sharing their stories, which I think is kind of frustrating for sure. I like to ask a question at the end of these interviews, and I feel like this one will be interesting because you've had such an interesting journey. But if you were to like speak to someone that might be in your former position, they might be in the fat acceptance community, or they were, and they want to lose weight, but they're afraid, right? Like, what would you say to that person, or even to yourself when you were first starting to have these thoughts? Like, what would be your message to them?
I'm just now realizing that I forgot to answer your past question fully. So basically, to go back to that real quick, and then I'll answer this one. Basically, through learning so much information from TikTok and YouTube of these creators who had intentionally lost a bunch of weight, or were talking about how fat acceptance can seem like a cult, I collected all this information and I sent it to 2 of my clients who I thought I was genuinely really close friends with. These 2 clients were people who I had met in person. I had stayed at their homes at one point when I was traveling to make content. And when I sent it to them, I didn't say, hey, fatties, listen up. Let's have a conversation about you losing weight. It was, hey, as your brand manager and, helping you with getting brand deals, I've noticed this trend in content that's happening. A lot of things are going viral right now in regards to this movement. And I've collected all this information. I really want you to watch these videos. And then once you do, let's have a conversation about it. And I was met with a lot of animosity, and basically I was told to stop and don't send me this again, and blocked by people that I've been friends with for years. I thought that they were my genuine friends. And so that really shocked me. And that was part of the reason why I realized that this was not, an accepting community of people, that it was showing signs of a cult at that point. And both of those creators ended up making content about the situation. So one of them posted publicly, this was a private conversation, by the way, that me and my two clients had. I was texting them we have each other's phone numbers. I was texting them this information, and one of them took screenshots of our private conversation and posted it on her public Instagram story, which she has over 60,000. Oh no, this one had over 100,000 followers. So she tags my account, and I have a swarm of fat acceptance people coming into my account, and I've been posting weight loss content, and they were just commenting and messaging me the most horrible things ever. They were saying that first of all, they said that I was ugly, which I'm like, okay, that's your opinion, whatever, but you don't have to say it. And then telling me that I wasn't going to lose the weight, that I should hold on to my old clothes, that I was going to gain all the weight back. So basically don't try. And just saying that I'm like this awful, awful person, when the reality is I was helping my friends make money, and I needed to make money too, because this is my business. And to be quite honest, a lot of the brands don't want to work with fat activist creators, because it's not, I think to most brands, they recognize that it's really not great messaging for people. And so that was part of realizing, hey, this is not something really positive for me anymore. And the other creator who I talked to, she posted an Instagram post basically saying that I'm not intentionally losing weight, and I'm never going to talk about that on my page. Didn't tag me or anything, thankfully. But after I had like this huge swarm of hundreds of people commenting and messaging me on my Instagram, I had like a breakdown, basically a public one, just like Rosie, the creator who you had been interviewing about, being into feederism and all this stuff. She mentioned also having a public breakdown. Yep, that was my story too. I had a breakdown because I didn't realize how negatively this community had impacted me until really that moment. Like I knew while losing weight, but I still was friends with these people. But then once I decided to show them the light, if you will, kind of bring awareness to this new content that was going viral about them, they didn't want to hear it, and they didn't want to even have a friendship with me anymore. And not only didn't want to have a friendship with me, but were sending flying monkeys basically to come attack me and my content, which thanks for the views. But, it was devastating, and it led me to staying up all night. I didn't get any sleep the night that happened. And I had other people message, not just the fat acceptance people, but also other people messaging me saying, hey, I'm so glad that you're speaking up and talking about this, because I've actually been genuinely afraid to lose weight, because I'm afraid of what people are going to say to me in this community if I do. And that to me was just so beyond fucked up, because how are you going to tell someone, hey, don't lose weight for your health, even though you're about to get type 2 diabetes and possibly have your foot cut off? Like, how is that positive? And yeah, it was really hurtful to me that these people didn't see me as a actual person. And yeah, I am going to use the excuse of you have to watch out for your health, because if you don't have your health, you can't keep posting online to get the brand deals, honey, because you're not going to exist anymore. Like, they want to keep saying that using health as an argument is an unoriginal concept, but it's like, if you're dead, what does it matter if you can post on Instagram?
Yeah, I think that it can be it's just the danger, and this is what I've said before, it's the danger in your whole identity becoming just a specific thing. And this is the same for if your whole identity is that you're a runner and like say you can't run anymore, right? That's going to be really devastating for you. And so it is important to try and not just pigeonhole yourself into these specific things, right? I think that it's really important to understand that you, as a human, there are many facets that make you. And I think with Instagram, it's social media. With social media, it has only exacerbated the problem because one of the tips on social media is focus on one thing, and that's when you grow in your niche, right? And so because of how popular social media is in our brains, for a lot of us, social media is real life, and real life is a side quest. And so we focus so much on this niche that it then becomes everything to us, right? It's like, this is who I am, this is what I am. And say you're a fat content creator or whatever, fat positive content creator, and that becomes your niche, and then that feels like it becomes who you are. When you maybe have to make a switch, or you have that change that you want to make, it becomes so much more than just, oh, I want to lose weight. It's almost like earth-shattering for some people. You know, I've had many conversations with people. Obviously, everyone has a different story, but very similar. Like, I was very into this thing. It became a very big part of my life. And then when I maybe decided that I needed to lose weight, there was this added thing on top of losing weight, which I've said many times, losing weight is very difficult. And so whenever you add anything on top of it, it makes it even harder, right? And I feel like that's kind of something that you had to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of showcases some of the reasons why social media can be such a negative for a lot of people, because I've been making content for 4 years, and some of my most viral videos, oddly enough, were me doing cheese pulls. So I was never doing like full-blown mukbangs or anything like that, but I think back in like 2022, I had 2 videos go really viral, and one of them was me eating a quesadilla, and the other one was a piece of pizza. And for some reason, so the piece of pizza got like over 900K views on Instagram, and then the quesadilla one got over 700K back to back. And that really led me into thinking, okay, people like seeing this content of me eating. I guess
that's how it goes.
That's what I'll get into.
That's how it goes.
And it's so odd because I'd already been making content from brand deals before that. And then, you know, your engagement goes up, you're able to get access to more deals. And so my income was attached to my addiction. And that is a really tricky thing to navigate. Especially online. But then after seeing all of the content creators who are making these really helpful educational videos about how to lose weight, and those videos do really well, I considered, okay, you know what? I'm going to lose weight and focus on trying to make my content more about doing it in a way that morally aligns with my values of doing it in like a healthy, sustainable way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, going back to that question. So if you were to speak to yourself, or someone that was in a similar position, what would you say to them?
I would say, don't worry about letting people down, because at the end of the day, you have to focus on yourself and actually care about your health. And if people want to send you negative comments or hate, use it as fuel. That's what I'm decided to do. You know, take the hate comments and use it to say, okay, you think that it's not possible? Well, just watch me, because I'm going to make it happen. I'm not going to give up on myself. And just don't worry, because at the end of the day, you really only have yourself. And Yeah, I wanted to mention one of your last videos was of the creator Fierce Fat Femme,
Mm-hmm.
Angelina, and she made a video on TikTok and then reposted it to Instagram that went pretty viral, talking about how there's a lot of fat phobic content coming out of what used to be fat positive creators. And I would say that I'm one of the creators that she's specifically talking about in that video. She doesn't name names, but I have facts. You know, I have proof to back up that she's talking about me. And one of them is that she was a client in my agency. I'd been posting on TikTok when I first started my agency that I was looking for clients, and she reached out and we'd been working together. We did 2 brand deals together at the time, and she'd seen me posting about how I was coming to the realization that fat acceptance was not something that was positive for at least myself anymore, and kind of coming to this realization that there was a lot of cult-like behavior. And when she saw that on my story, I have a group chat for my agency, and she put this huge long paragraph talking about how I'd been putting out fat phobic content and everyone should check their internalized fat phobia, and that she's leaving the group, and basically tried to destroy my company, which thankfully I had some sane people still in there who stayed and we're still working and getting brands. And we're actually working with the Oscars this season to help promote the 96 Oscars. So really excited about that. She did not ruin my company, thankfully. But yeah, she tried to. And that's why I posted on my story tagging John, saying that I thought that the video was about me, and that's how we got in contact and why I'm on the channel here today.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. And yeah, I was just shocked to see that video blow up the way it did. But my theory is that it's blowing up for shock value.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's blowing up because people agree with what Angelina's saying. I think it's blowing up because people are so shocked that she has this hatred towards people like myself who are making content to try and help people lose weight. And I mean, if you want to call me fat phobic, I guess go ahead, but I'm still fat, and I've been fat since I was like 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I think genuinely everyone has some internalized, if you want to call it fat phobia, because of the society we live in. It is very harsh towards larger people. It's not as friendly as we want it to be, but to be just writing me, someone who's been fat my whole life, as fat phobic is hurtful, because I'm not trying to hurt people. I'm trying to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And a way that I've been helped is, it's going to sound crazy, but I love the trolls. The trolls have motivated me a lot to actually lose weight. I had some videos go viral on TikTok last year, and one of them was this trend where they use the sound that goes, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And it was talking about how, you know, if I had a thin friend who invited me to go to a restaurant, but the seating wasn't accessible for me because I'm larger, that they wouldn't get why I didn't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of trolls, if you will, in the comments saying, you know, it's kind of like, it sucks on both ends, because okay, we're friends with you and you're plus size, and now we both don't get to go to this restaurant together. And they're not doing anything negative towards me by inviting me to go to a restaurant, right? It's kind of like me villainizing my thin friend for inviting me somewhere and then getting mad at them because I can't fit. And so having the trolls point that out to me was actually really beneficial to my growth as a person, because I started to recognize, well, I don't think I've always been the problem in regards to, you know, I think that clothing sizes should be accessible. I think places should be accessible. But at the end of the day, like, I can change parts of myself and parts of me that are actively hurting me and my health. And if I have the ability to do it, I should. And I recognize that there is a lot of privilege in regards to being able to focus on losing weight and doing it in a healthy, sustainable way, because food deserts are a thing and people with disabilities are not as able to easily lose weight. But for those of us who are able to lose weight, we should really be prioritizing trying to do it because it's good for our health. And also, I don't want to be the friend who is seen as negative and upset when I get invited to go up to a place. You know, it's not my thin friend's fault that I can't fit into a booth.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of something that I say a lot is like when I was at my heaviest, I didn't feel like I was living, I was just existing, right? And I think that that's go ahead.
That's the crazy part, because I've also had when I got the swarm of hate comments from that one creator posting about me, someone said, "Oh, you didn't start living until you started losing the weight." And that was not the case for me. I was living what I thought was my best life at 350 pounds. Now looking back on it, I was actually living a good life. I just could have been living a healthier, more energized life if I had started to implement like the healthier things, like changing my eating habits and, you know, exercising more. But when I was my highest weight, I lived in a beautiful house and I had friends and I had a crazy wardrobe of clothes because I was a fat influencer. Like I was not waiting to live my life to get thin. I was living my fat, fabulous life, but then I had health complications. So I had to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's beautiful because, you know, everyone's experience, and I always say is like whenever I share my stories and stuff is like, this is just my experience. I can't speak for everyone. And I think that's important for people to understand, right? Like your experience is your experience, but you can't speak for everyone, and I would never claim to do that, right? But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. If someone wants to find you, where would they go ahead and do that?
So my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are all the same name. It's Shannon Davy World, and that's spelled ShannonDavyWorld. And yeah, please feel free to check me out on all my social media. I would really appreciate it, since I was making, you know, this fat positive content, and since I've lost weight, I've actually lost a ton of engagement. I lost like 300 followers. And it's really put a damper on me wanting to make content anymore. But I love making content, and I would still make it even though I was getting only like 5 views. I don't care.
Yeah. And then all that stuff will be linked, so it'll be easy to find. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.